Welcome to another episode of Equity Mates here on AusBiz. My name is Bryce, and as always, I'm joined by my equity buddy, Ren. How are you going?
I'm very good, Bryce. Great to be back for another episode in what has been a very short week for us.
Yes.
Starting on Tuesday, ending on a Thursday.
Yep.
Bring in the 3-day work week,
Love
I
it,
say.
love it. And we're closing out with a great episode today. We're joined by an expert who is bringing one ETF with a great thematic that is very interesting to the Equity Mates community, and another stock for the watch list. So it is our pleasure to welcome Chris Gubbins to Equity Mates. Chris, welcome.
Hi guys, thanks for having me. Good to be here.
So Chris is an associate financial advisor with EL&C Baillieu and has been with them since 2017. And as I said, we're going to be going through an ETF and a stock on his watch list. Just a reminder that the information provided on Equity Mates and AusBiz is for entertainment and general purposes only. But Chris, you'd also have a bit of a disclaimer that you'd like to give us before we get cracking.
So look, it's just a brief one, but just for listeners to note that the stocks I'll be discussing are general in nature, and I'm not taking into account your personal objectives, financial situations or needs. And obviously you should always speak with your own investment advisor if you want advice that is suitable to yourselves.
Very good reminder, Chris, to kick us off. Now, as Bryce said, you've brought an ETF and a stock that you're watching to talk to us about today. Let's start with the ETF because, as Bryce said, it's a thematic that's very exciting. It's getting a lot of buzz at the moment. The ETF is VanEck Video Gaming and Esports ETF, ASX ticker ESPO. So let's start at the very beginning. Let's start with the thematic. Why do you think video games and esports is a thematic worth watching at the moment?
Yeah, look, put simply, it's massive and it's growing exponentially. To provide some perspective, there are currently 3 billion active gamers in the world, and that's more than a third of the global population. Comparing that with 2.8 billion Facebook users, you get a sense into how widespread and popular video gaming really is. But most importantly for investors, gaming revenues are on a similar upward trajectory to the gaming popularity. They've doubled in the last 5 years, growing at an annual rate of about 12%.
So pretty phenomenal growth numbers there, and it's, over the last decade or so, it's just been pretty phenomenal. The question, I guess, is where does the next stage of growth come from? What are the main players and some of the companies that are involved in that?
Yeah, so an area of industry that's a little bit less understood, probably underappreciated, is esports. So for those unaware, esports is any professional competitive gaming that's done in an organised format with a specific prize up for grabs. So esports is now the largest or the fastest growing sport on earth. It's got a larger audience than the NFL, the AFL and the NRL combined. In 2019, esports had a viewership of 443 million, and these figures are still only growing.
Yeah, it's pretty fascinating. Now, I guess the question is, there's some big companies in this space. All the big tech companies have some form of gaming ventures, but there's a lot of pure play companies as well. Electronic Arts, Activision, and the like. Why is the ETF the format that you want to invest in this trend? Why an ETF over some of these big name individual companies?
Yeah, good question. And the narrative's the same when discussing ETFs in general. And the key benefit with ETFs over direct equities is that it's just instant diversification with one trade. So ETFs are a way to express an idea in a portfolio. And this thematic is long-term structural growth stories, and that's something I believe has a lot of merit. And by choosing an ETF, you're able to access this thematic, in a smart, cost-effective way. And you're also not subjecting yourself, to stock selection risk. In addition, approximately half of gamers and half of video game revenues, come out of the Asia Pacific. So you want a strategy that appreciates this demographic diversity, and that's what the esports ETF does, with around half of the holdings domiciled in Asia Pacific.
So let's get under the hood and let's talk about some of the names in the ETF, and perhaps if you can share some of them that most excite you. You know, if you think about the video game ecosystem, it's massive. There's, you know, the hardware makers and the, you know, the consoles, the Xbox, the PlayStation, and the like. Then there's all of the, you know, the component parts that go into that hardware. Then on the other side, you've got software, you've got the game developers, you've got a whole array of people in that ecosystem, and they're all you know, geographically spread out around the world. What are some of the big holdings in the ETF, and what are some of the holdings that I guess excite you the most in this ETF and in this industry?
Yeah, so a high growth component of the ETF is Activision Blizzard. So they focus on development and publication of interactive entertainment. Activision's one of the world's most valuable gaming companies. They've developed Call of Duty, World of Warcraft, and Guitar Hero, and Candy Crush. A lot of these, you know, household names. Their video game franchises have seen huge growth in engagement from gamers in the 2020 lockdowns. The adjusted revenue in Activision is 1.52 billion US, which, you know, easily topped the 1.32 billion US expected revenues. And their new free-to-play battle royale Warzone from Call of Duty has recorded, you know, an impressive 60 million players so far. Another component of the ETF, you know, which is the fourth largest constituent in the fund, is Tencent, which makes up just under 7% of the fund. It's the world's top game publisher by revenue. It sort of leads the industry with several $1 billion more than second place, which is Sony. They're based in China, as I'm sure you're aware. And in 2019, their online gaming grossed 115 billion yuan, which is more than tenfold increase to their 2010 figures. So Tencent has significant investments in companies, you know, positioned across the entire gaming ecosystem, and they control stakes in some of the world's most popular games, you know, such as League of Legends, Fortnite, and Clash of Clans.
So, Chris, the industry pumped out 175 billion in revenue in 2021, which is pretty impressive. What we're noticing, though, is the changing dynamic in which a lot of these companies that you've just mentioned are making revenue from the games or from as Ren said, the different parts of the ecosystem. Are you able to talk us through some of the major shifts you're seeing in that revenue space?
Yeah, so a bit about the background of the thematic. So gaming's sort of not necessarily new, as you know. It's sort of been around since the early 80s with the introduction of Tetris. And then today, as I mentioned earlier, there's 3 billion gamers worldwide, and the 2021 revenue of 175 billion, it's up from 140 billion, only 2 years ago. A lot of the revenue in recent years has seen a shift in the way that the companies make their revenue, whereas you used to just buy the games outright. Now a lot of games are free to play but contain a lot of microtransactions or subscriptions within the game. An example is Fortnite. It's free to download, but players will buy cosmetic items for their characters. Fortnite's also done tie-ups with Marvel, where some of the costumes were up to $75 each. And they also did an online concert with Travis Scott, which had over 12 million viewers.
Oh, missed that concert, but we'll make sure to get to it next time. Look, we could talk about games all day, but you do have a stock to tell us about as well. So we'll move on, but just one final note about the ETF. Currently no Australian companies in it, so hope to see the Australian video game industry grow and an Australian name make it into that ETF at some point. But Chris, Let's move to the stock. A stock that is pretty small, but gets a lot of hype or gets a lot of discussion online in the retail investor community, and that's Digital Wine Ventures, ASX ticker DW8. So for people who haven't heard about the company before, let's start at the beginning. What do Digital Wine do, and why do you like them?
Yeah, so what Digital Wines is, and you're right, they are a small company that have been in the headlines recently with some of their recent news articles, but they operate a wine distribution company called Wine Depot, who cater for producers, distributors, importers, retailers, and trade buyers through their cloud-based technology platforms to sell wine. So the Wine Depot is the cornerstone investment, and that platform connects buyers and sellers in a cost-effective way. and then it arranges the packaging, the fulfillment and distribution of all orders. And sort of what it offers is, or what it can include is temperature controlled delivery, where it's required, but it effectively expands the market for smaller distributors who otherwise can't afford to service ad hoc orders just due to the cost and labour of the exercise.
So it had a lot of attention in the Equity Mates community. It's a stock we spoke about, I think, 2 years ago on the show. And it sort of trickled along, and then at the start of this year just went gangbusters, going up 350% to April, and has subsequently fallen about 65% since then. So what's happened? What's been the story? Is there some fundamentals that is actually going wrong within the business? Is this a turnaround story? What are we seeing?
Yeah, so what happened? There were lots of positive announcements this year. They've sort of signed up partnerships with Vivino, which is the global leading wine app at the moment, and eBay and Amazon as well. So the share price sort of rocketed, as you would have seen, up into the high teens. But what the market realised is that there was an obvious disconnect between the revenue levels and the market cap following all that share price growth. So the market sort of factored that in, and the price has sort of come back down a bit. But the Parton acquisition, which I can speak to further in a moment, but that really sort of shores up that disconnect between the revenue levels and the market cap. And I strongly believe that following this acquisition, there's sort of now nothing stopping them from acquiring those major accounts and bringing in some of those businesses where the volume they move on a monthly basis might sort of be tens of thousands of cases. And the acquisition certainly opens them up for acquiring these types of customer bases.
Chris, is this a crowded space? Like, are there competitors to Digital Wine offering similar services to Wine Depot?
Look, not directly. The value add that they have is that it's cost effective for wineries and distributors to connect and meet through these distribution channels. And a recent sort of partnership they've announced with eBay is really effective in that space, because it essentially when buyers through eBay put wholesale purchases through, Digital Wines now does all the packaging and fulfilling and delivery of these orders. So it allows Digital Wines to essentially tap in to the 12 million monthly visitors that eBay gets, and that's sort of something they've been able to use. But look, in the hospitality space and in the larger sort of wholesale market, there sort of otherwise wasn't a way for these guys to connect the way that they are.
Chris, you mentioned acquisitions there, and they raised $6 million earlier in the year for the acquisition of Wine Delivery Australia. Are you able to talk us through perhaps their strategy when it comes to acquisitions and partnerships? It sounds like, or seems like, this is their sort of next stage of growth.
Yeah, so the strategy behind acquisitions is to sort of look for companies that are excelling or have a lot of value add into an area of the Digital Wines business that they might be lacking in. So the Parton Wine Group acquisition, which was one of the most recent ones, was very strategic. And Parton was a business that was servicing the same sort of customer group that Digital Wines were currently working with, but they perform logistics in a very different way. So with Parton, 95% of their volume was for trade deliveries, and about 5% was consumers, whereas with Digital Wines, that 95% of their volumes were for consumers and only 5% were for trade deliveries. So now that they've sort of bought Parton Wine, they've been able to dump a lot of their volume on the Parton logistics and sort of been able to hit the ground running with that acquisition and make it quite profitable pretty quickly.
Yeah, interesting. Well, Chris, it is a stock that keeps popping up in the Equity Mates community, so it's always great to hear from an expert, get their opinion on it as well. Unfortunately, we have run out of time though, but thank you very much for sharing your time with us and the AusBiz and Equity Mates communities. A reminder that we spoke about the VanEck esports ETF, ESPO is the ticker, and the stock was Digital Wine Ventures DW8 if you're playing along at home. But appreciate you coming on. It was an absolute pleasure. We really enjoyed it.
Good. Thanks for having me, guys.
And that brings us to the end of another episode and another week here at AusBiz. It's been a great week as always, and Ren, the markets keep on ticking away. We'll be back on Monday next week.
We will be back on Monday, back for a full 4-day week. It's tough staying in the content game, isn't it? But look forward to seeing you then.